From the Performance Racing Network at Charlotte Motor Speedway.
Trouble, we got a car in the wall. 4, 5, 6 cars pile in. Jimmy Johnson now pulls to the bumper. He's going to try to make a move off Truex.
It's Racers Odds. Now, here are your hosts, John Roberts, Jeff Hammond, and Jeff Culiandro.
And welcome once again, everybody, to Racers Odds. This is a joint production between the Visa Network and the Performance Racing Network. This betcast is available on many different formats. You can see us on YouTube, NASCAR.com. Listen on Sirius XM. Jeff, we're easy to find. It's a lot of fun, and you can catch some good information along the way.
No, well, you can find us in a lot of different places, and all you got to do, folks, is just start looking around. As I said, start checking. You can click on PRN.com. They can also tell you how to get to us and maybe some other ways. But the cool thing is we're going to get a chance to talk about racing and what it means to you if you want to get involved and place a little friendly wager on your favorite driver or a long shot.
Yes, exactly. There is sharp money all over the place when it comes to wagering on racing, and we're here to give you the information you need. Now, had you watched Racers Odds last weekend, you would have known that Kurt Busch was one of the favorites going into this thing. We talked a lot about him, and there was a lot of money to be made. Kurt Busch went off at 20-1, and he was plus 240 on some of his matchups, which means there was a lot of money to be made with Kurt Busch's victory. So now, as we head to the Northeast, back to a Sunday afternoon, we have a very short, slick, hot racetrack in the New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and Brad Keselowski is going to have the best view of the green flag when it waves. Jeff, as a crew chief, if your driver is up there on the pole, you got the top pit selection. Brad Keselowski in the number 2 team, that's one to watch today.
He will be one to watch. And we got a lot of variables out there today. As always, whenever we show up at a lot of these racetracks right now, John, we find out that we've got a new set of right and left side tires that Goodyear's brought. We've also got PJ1 is being introduced here for the second time at New Hampshire. This time it's a little bit wider groove, trying to make racing a little bit better. And not to mention, hey, the usual NASCAR aero combination of engine and aero, kind of like, all put together, is going to be part of it. But you talk about qualifying from a crew chief. I love a guy that's got my car up toward the front. If you don't believe that, let's listen to our pole setter.
But as you look to rank the tracks for qualifying well matters, this is certainly towards the top. I think probably the only track I can think of where it's maybe more important would be Martinsville in the fall, or the two races we have there in the spring and fall. But we're happy with that effort. It's certainly bodes well for our shot to get those stage wins, and of course the overall race win come Sunday. But we still have to go earn it, right? So you're happy for it. You take a breath, you celebrate it, and then you get your head back down and go to work.
And go to work is exactly what they will do today. We'll talk a lot more about Brad Keselowski's odds. They have changed dramatically since he got that pole position. But right now, let's get you out to a very hot New Hampshire Motor Speedway, where one of the hardworking guys, of course, our good friend Pat Patterson. Pat, I know one thing everybody's talking about is the heat. It's everywhere in the country, but there as well.
Lost sound.
Okay, does Pat hear us? I don't believe he does. Pat does not. Okay, so in this case, let us move on now. We'll talk about odds to win this race, but also how about let's get a little bit of overview on NASCAR wagering. For that, we go to Jeff Culiandro, our odds-making and handicapping expert. And Jeff, the overview of racing and wagering right now, we basically have three things we look at. It's odds to win a race, head-to-head matchup, and groups as well. But there's more to it than just that.
Oh, well, there sure is, John. First of all, we do look at those three sort of main areas of wagering, but there are so many more. And as NASCAR wagering continues to evolve across the United States, there will be all sorts of new bets. The wagering menu will greatly expand. I look forward to that. I even look forward to the day when we have a carryover type bet that can potentially roll over into some big numbers.
All right, Jeff, thank you very much. We'll be back with you in just a moment. But Jeff Hammond, when we look at one of the important things about this race today, we are talking about PJ1. Now, PJ1 is a compound that's been around for quite some time. It is very similar it's similar to candy. or soda pop or Coca-Cola. What it does is it gives drivers a little bit more grip. It's been used in the NHRA for years,
Right.
but this week it is spread all over the first and the third groove on a racetrack.
Yeah, so again, the folks at SMI have come up with their own version of this, and it's been working really great. All the tracks that they've used it at so far, whether it's Kentucky or whether it's been places like even Texas. So there's a lot of, I guess you might say, experience that's going into this, and they've been using it all weekend long. So it'll be real interesting to see what kind of a matchup and combination they come with today. I'm sure they've learned a lot since the Xfinity race on Saturday. Watched that race, and it did have it contributed, and at the same time, it challenged a lot of the teams yesterday. So today, I don't think it's going to be any different. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out today. But they're ready, and this is something we have seen and helped produce a lot of great racing, including Bristol earlier in the year.
So the two areas we tackle here on the Racers Odds are, of course, NASCAR and NASCAR wagering. Sports betting is becoming more and more popular across the country. As a matter of fact, last week, the state of New Hampshire took a big step towards legalizing it, and there are many other states right now that are working on that. Jeff Hammond, if you want to get back to NASCAR, there's a lot good going on here as well. We've had 3 different winners in the last 3 races in NASCAR, including one guy, and Justin Haley, you really didn't think was going to win Daytona. Kurt Busch got back to his winning ways. So, Jeff, there's a lot of excitement. And also at the same time, though, more than half of the races this season have been won by a margin of less than a second. If you don't think this racing action right now that's going on is good, you're pretty hard to please.
I'm getting ready to say, if you didn't see last weekend, folks, you probably missed one of the best races that we have seen in recent years. Not this 2019, but in the last 5 or 6 years. It was a great battle between 2 brothers, and Kyle and Kurt. Kurt came out on top, obviously. But the battle themselves, this good, hard-nosed racing is something that I grew up on, in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was really good to see these 2 guys go at each other hot and heavy, along with their other competitors. I can't leave out Eric Jones, who put on a great show. I hate it for Joey Logano, because it looked like he had a legitimate shot to pull the win off for Team Penske. But in the end, this is what we all hope to see if you're a NASCAR fan, is good, aggressive racing without having a whole lot of wrecking going on, but a lot of beating and banging at the same time.
So, Jeff Cuyandro, when you look at handicapping or placing odds on a race like this, you have to look at past performance as well. But, each Busch brother has 3 previous victories at this racetrack. Is this a place where you look at previous performance?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, John. It has to be. I think you've got to sort of, as you kind of develop your own handicapping style, you've got to sort of measure what means the most to you. Is it past performance at a particular track? Is it recent performance on all tracks, like the last 3 or 4 races of the season? Or is it value, or so many other variables? So as a handicapper, you really have to figure out what is important to you. And I can tell you from looking at New Hampshire for many, many years, definitely past performance on not just that track, but a few other similar tracks that can be drawn in as more recent comparables.
And there's going to be a lot of comparisons made on old Kyle Busch. We talked a lot about Kurt Busch being your most recent winner, but also Kyle Busch is one of those drivers that's kind of hit or miss when it comes to New Hampshire, Jeff. So, of course, he's Kyle Busch. He's always a favorite to win, but it seems like he is either winning or finishing well back in the pack.
Yeah, and that's kind of Kyle Busch. For as great as he is, okay, we see mistakes on pit row. We see, just other things where he races aggressively, and that's fine. But when you're a favorite, like today, he's plus 250. Think about the amount of money that you're having to wager, more than Martin Truex at plus 450 just to get the same return. And any mistakes as a big favorite are really personified and are very glaring. So you have to take a lot of caution, even with the great Kyle Busch.
Jeff, I do have a question for you. And looking at my notes, and you talk about looking at past performance. We have 9 former winners in this field today. Yeah. And some of them, recently, and we got several of them that haven't won, here in several years. But they do have multiple wins there, like a guy like Ryan Newman, for example. When you're looking at this particular nugget, you might say, or this bit of information, where do you draw the line and give this person okay, he was good here then, but in the past
Right.
maybe 3 or 4 races or 5 races this year or certain races this year, that drop him down a little bit as far as how you would rank him?
Well, I think you got to look at a few things with Ryan Newman. I think, first of all, you've got to look at everything independently. You have him, yes, as a former winner, but true, it hasn't been in several years. But then you also look that he's sort of outkicked his coverage, if you will, with Roush. He's raced better than he's qualified, okay? And then you take a look at his odds and where that value is. And when you look at everything, while you can't necessarily draw him in as a threat to win, you can certainly see him perhaps winning a matchup, even a group, or improving his qualifying to race, where he starts compared to where he finishes. It wouldn't be a surprise at all to see Newman move through the field.
Yeah, so if you go back to just a few nights ago, before we had performances on the racetrack, there was a lot of movement in these odds and in the wagering as well, because what happens is as bookmakers look at these things, money comes in. Where you qualify, where you practice, things change. A little later on in the program, we'll tell you exactly who moved in what direction when it comes to odds to win the race itself. But there are a lot of other things we're going to look at today. Going to look at head-to-head matchups, who looks good there, and also these groups. Some very interesting groups today to look at, because let's remember, this race can go by in a hurry. Not a lot of time to adjust on your car. So we'll take our first quick break here on Racers Odds and be back in just a moment.
The IRS is the most feared agency in the world. You've heard ads from other companies offering to help taxpayers only if they owe over $10,000. Here at Platinum Tax Defenders, we're A-plus rated with the Better Business Bureau, and we're proud to be one of the only tax firms in the country who understands that people who owe less than $10,000 need help just as badly. The IRS doesn't care how much money you owe. They'll still garnish your wages and even seize your assets. So whether you owe just a few $1,000s or hundreds of thousands, call now for your free tax consultation. If you qualify, we may even be able to reduce your tax debt down to a small fraction of what you owe. So don't wait until the IRS seizes your property and garnishes your wages. Call 800-856-1330 and get your tax problem resolved once and for all. That number again is 800-856-1330. 800-856-1330.
As states have begun the legalization of sports gambling, the entire sports landscape is changing.
I think we're going to see more and more states fall in line, and this gets legalized across probably all 50 states.
And so is the way you listen to Sports Talk Radio. I'm Brent Musburger, and on the Vegas Stats and Information Network, we follow the money and the games. It's sports talk you can bet on. So check out VSiN. Odds are you're going to like what you hear on Channel 204 and streaming on your phone or at home on SiriusXM connected devices and speakers.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSiN, changing the way you watch sports.
And now more Racers Odds with John Roberts, Jeff Hammond, and Jeff Caliandro.
And welcome back, everybody. Got a very special guest for you this week on Racers Odds. Want to welcome in Steve Makinen, who is an odds maker and also the editor of VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Steve, thank you very much for joining us. We sure appreciate the time, man, and welcome to the program.
I appreciate being on, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Steve, what have you seen the growth be like in the world of NASCAR wagering? We know the two worlds didn't exactly collide at first, but it seems like now that both are growing in the right direction together. What do you see the growth in NASCAR wagering, especially over the last couple of years?
Well, you're right. I think the growth is there. That is number one key, I believe. One of the things that I believe has contributed to that is NASCAR management embracing that part of what that can do for the sport. Obviously, we know how much wagering is done on football and how big football is. I don't think NASCAR can get to that type of level for wagering, but it's a great way to spice up the way you watch a race. And certainly adds a great amount of entertainment value to the sport.
Okay, Steve, I'm curious about how much of a challenge is it to analyze and get the odds made as far as NASCAR racing compared to other sports? Is it a lot different?
Well, it's different in the fact that you're looking at up to 40 guys impacting a single event. Typically, a team is a unit. You got 40 different units out there. That's what makes it a little different. But the statistics I use, the formulas that I've developed over the years have certainly helped me sharpen that side of it.
Yeah, because Steve, also we talk about this on a weekly basis here. That when you're talking about a football game, you're talking about human beings completely, and you're talking about 100-yard field and 6 points for a touchdown. When you look at NASCAR, the venues change every week, and not only is it just that human performance, but there's also mechanical performance in there as well. I mean, it's a race car. It's not a Rolex. It does break sometimes. Does that throw a wrench, so to speak, into how you make the odds?
Absolutely. However, what I tend to try to do there is eliminate what I would call fluke circumstances. One of the nice statistics that you'll see for NASCAR races is the driver rating for each race. That gives a better indication in many cases than the finish position, and that definitely tends to help me really get a better overall feel for how a particular driver did in a race. So you get more accurate information because of the upgraded statistics lately. So it's definitely a welcome change.
Hi, Steve. This is Jeff Cuyandro. It's great to talk to you. The work that you do for Point Spread Weekly and VSiN as a whole is really outstanding. One of my questions is, I know that you've mentioned that every track is sort of has an outline as a handicapping stability grade is something that I use and I know you use. In your mind, how much has the new aero package this season affected the grade of stability by each track?
I'll be honest, Jeff. It hasn't had as great of an impact as I thought it would. I'm a little curious. I'd like to actually study more data. You're probably going to have to get a full year's worth, maybe 2 years worth before you can actually make a judgment on that. But I'm quite surprised how it hasn't as had of a big of an impact as I thought it would.
Hey, Steve, when you look at the odds and how they shape up this week for the 1 mile race here at New Hampshire, I don't think it's any particular surprise that Martin Truex. That Kyle Busch is on the top of that, but some of the other ratings along there: Martin Truex plus 450, Brad Keselowski, now your pole sitter, and one of the faster guys in practice at plus 450. Do you think these odds are indicative of what may happen this afternoon? Are they pretty much right on when it comes in terms of drivers to win?
Of course. This particular track, Loudon, I give it what I call my handicap ability grade of A, meaning it's easier to use statistics to project the finish of a race like this. There's several, obviously, Talladegas, Daytonas, that type of thing. It's a crapshoot most of the time, and hard to predict the winner there based upon statistics. But these flat tracks, Loudon, specifically as number 2 out of the 23 tracks in terms of my list of handicap ability. So I would look at those odds, and I would think somebody knows what they're talking about, and one of these guys is probably going to be your winner.
Okay, Steve, with that being said, what about the fact when they come along and they put, the PJ1 down, and especially now that they've widened it out and trying to create more avenues for racing or better racing, does that make you pause and reflect when you've got a variable like that you really, it's even more out of your control than just the mechanical side of it?
Yes. However, when I tend to look at situations like that, the stronger teams, the stronger drivers, everyone's facing the same changes. So typically the teams that adjust to the changes better, I tend to think are the better and stronger teams. So I would think that actually plays in favor of your favorites each week when changes like that come along.
Steve, what's the future? Not just in NASCAR, but the future of sports wagering. When we hear all these states starting to look at it, the way it's sweeping the country, the way people are embracing it, and you look at you look at the Kentucky Derby for so long. It's been there, and it changes the way you watch the event. What do you think the future is like for sports wagering nationwide and sports-wide?
Well, I'm excited. I'm sure anybody involved in the Racers Odds Show has to be excited too. I mean, the ability to sit at an event, I mean, obviously people overseas have done this for a long time with their soccer events, being able to go to the corner parlor and place a wager, and then go into the stadium and watch a game. Now that to me is a great way to watch a game, a great entertaining way, as long as you keep in mind what it's there for. It's for fun, it's for entertainment. But I think anybody who's involved in this side, Beeson has seen such growth with their network and their even our digital magazine, Point Spread Weekly, over the last couple of years. A lot of great reasons to be excited about the future of gaming in this country.
Steve, when I take a look at your simulations in Point Spread Weekly, I noticed that you have your own set of odds that are listed beside the average finish. What do those odds represent, and why are they so much different from, a lot of the regular sportsbook wagering odds?
Well, unfortunately, those odds are the actual odds that the simulation pumped out. So if I run the simulation 1,000 times and you get a guy wins 6 times, you're getting about a 6-to-1 ratio, or 100.
Can I follow
times,
up?
you're getting about a 6-to-1 ratio there. So that's how that number pops up, 6-to-1. Now, obviously, the books they have to put a price on it, some big, and that's where you'll get the adjusted odds from. And then obviously there's going to be differences from what the stats project as to what the maybe some of the sharper bettors who move the money and that type of thing will project themselves. So that's where the differences will typically come from.
Makes sense. So if I'm reading it correctly, while Kyle Busch is the deserving favorite at plus 250, his actual true odds should be closer to 7-to-1. And conversely, you have Jimmy Johnson listed at about 26-to-1, where he can easily be found a wager on as much as 50-to-1.
Yes. Well, one of the things, too, I've learned this over NASCAR over the last 10 years is higher profile drivers will get stiffer VIG prices on them. So if you like a guy like Kyle Busch, or you look at a guy like Jimmy Johnson, Joey Logano, these guys you're gonna have to pay higher prices just because of who they are.
And also, Steve, when it comes right down to it, when you do the 3 different things that we look at, we look at odds for a driver to win singularly. We look at head-to-head matchups and also our groups. Is there a place that you see the particular value, the place that you would go particularly in one of those 3 categories to get a better value for the wagerer?
Oh, yeah, and I know Jeff feels, Cagliandro feels the same way here. I'm a matchup guy myself, and I actually follow some of Jeff's things on Twitter and such, and I like to see who he may be playing on certain weeks because I've seen him be very successful. So I'm a matchup guy myself, and in my opinion, that's the best place you can look for maybe finding some weak spots in lines each week.
All right, Steve Makinen, thank you so much for joining us, odds maker and editor of VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Man, we appreciate the insight and the time, and we'll certainly be watching you on VSiN. And again, thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. I'd just like to throw out we got a couple great issues this week coming for Point Spread Weekly and other digital magazines. college football guides coming out on Wednesday, I believe. And more especially, I guess, our 100th edition of the Point Spread Weekly is coming out this week. So it's been 2 years. It's been a great run. We've had great readership increases over the entire period. So we're very excited about this week and the future coming up for both publications.
All right, Steve, that is awesome. Congratulations. Yeah, I mean, keep up the good work, man.
Thank you. All right, appreciate it, guys.
Okay.
Enjoy the race today.
All right, thank you.
That is Steve Mackin, an odds maker and editor of VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. And Hammond, that just goes to show that these guys, when you get odds, they're not thrown out there. They're not haphazard. They're not willy-nilly. They come on the toes of simulation. They come on the toes of a lot of statistics that we get.
Well, I mean, let's look at what we do. We're trying to be analysts. We try to look at all the ins and outs that we use to try to come up a determination of, well, this guy should run good today. This guy won't run good today for this reason. And what I was surprised about, John, you and I both went, along with Jeff C., we went down to Las Vegas, and the first time we did Racer's Odds Show, and they were showing us some of the information that they had already assembled. And I was really blown away how accurate it was and how in-depth it was. So, now these guys right here, they do this odds making for a reason, and they're very insightful. And even though racing is kind of new kid on the block, they're ready. I mean, they're not coming here haphazardly or anything like that. They've got their facts. So when you look at somebody making an assessment on what to expect in today's race and the people they think are going to run well, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to be factors. Now, racing is racing, and every now and then mechanically and because of other fellow competitors and circumstances, that can be altered. But more times than not, they're good at what they do.
Yeah, and Jeff and Steve both have reminded us, and I think it's very important to, you can't really overstate that this is for entertainment purposes only, and only wager what you can afford to lose
smart.
Because there's too much that is out of your
smart
control.
Money. That's
smart money, and that's where it is. You want to put the smart money on the smart drivers, and that's why we are here to give you the information you need every week here on Racers Odds. Want to welcome in once again the guys from NASCAR.com who are with us today, and also there are many other platforms where you can find us. It's YouTube, it's VSiN, it's PRN. You can find us in a lot of places, Jeff, and we have a lot of information for you along the way.
Yeah, we still got a lot to do, a lot to go in this show, and this is going to be a pretty wild race. We say it's going to be a short race, and folks, you got to realize these stages are only going to be 75, and that last run of about 151 laps will complete the 318-mile event at New Hampshire today. So it's going to be fast and furious, so you better get ready to, as Larry Mack likes to say, pull them belts tight one more time.
Yep, and you better do it quickly because you don't have much time. So we got a lot more to get to over the course of this show. We've already talked about some of the odds of the certain drivers to go out and win the race. We're going to hear from one driver in particular about the PJ1, the VHT, the track bike compound that's on the track and how it may affect the performances of several different drivers. Then we're going to move on to the head-to-head matchups where our experts tell us some of the real sharp money is when it comes to wagering on NASCAR. Then we will run through the groups for you, and we will also tell you what our particular favorites are along the way. Jeff, we're going to put you guys, Hammond, we're going to put you guys on the spot.
Well, I mean, that's what we're here for.
You're the experts.
We're supposed to be able to, as they say, sit on the stove and sweat ice water.
Yeah. Jeff, see, some people say sweat ice water. I think it's other things along the way. But, when it comes to sweating, guys, this is going to be a very hot race up there. What we said last weekend about the heat at Kentucky, well, that was, lessened just a little bit by the night race. But now this is in the afternoon, and just because you're going to the Northeast does not mean that it's going to be cool. It's going to be hot up there. It's going to be slick. And once again, the pit crews are only going to have a couple of shots, Hammond, to work on these race cars, and that might exactly determine what becomes of a driver because of such little time on pit road.
Yep.
We'll take a quick break here on Racers Odds. When we come back, we'll hear from the favorite and also continue to tell you where the smart money is on wagering on today's race. Stay with us.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Mackinnon runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSiN, changing the way you watch sports.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
You didn't think he'd put down the microphone completely, did you?
Greetings from Las Vegas.
Well, neither did we. Hear legendary broadcaster Brent Musburger on the Vegas Stats and Information Network.
I never told my wife how much fun I had when I was staying here for about 3 weeks. Oh, it's terrible living in a casino. It was the greatest 3 weeks of my life. This is the only book in town that's open 24 hours.
There you go.
Make that bet around 4 o'clock in the morning.
You don't need a dress code. Pajamas are good.
Brent Musburger on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. Sirius XM Channel 204.
Jake was in big trouble with the IRS. He owed how much?
$92,000.
Ouch. The IRS left no room for Jake to breathe.
They put a lien on my house, took all the money out of my bank account, took money out of my paychecks. So it was a nightmare.
He needed help fast.
I figured that all these companies were the same until I called Federal Tax Management. You could just tell they knew what they were talking about. Right then and there, I felt like I had some hope.
Stop the liens, levies, and garnishments fast and qualify for one of several special IRS programs that could reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. So, how'd it go for Jake?
They did what they said they would do. They came through for me. I ended up saving an unbelievable amount. I was so jazzed. I was extremely happy.
If you owe more than $10,000 in back taxes, take Jake's advice.
Give Federal Tax Management a phone call. If they help me, they can help anybody.
Call the Federal Tax Management Hotline now. 800-425-6381. 800-425-6381. 800-425-6381.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
It's more Racers Odds.
And welcome back once again, everybody, to Racers Odds. Want to thank everybody for coming along for the ride with us on this edition. Still got much more information for you. We've already talked to a couple of odds-making experts for you to tell you where the sharp money is. And we have 301 laps around the Magic Mile of Loudon, New Hampshire today. And got to warn you, it can go by in a hurry, but also we know for sure it is hot. For more on that, let's go out to the racetrack and join Pat Patterson live. Pat, I'm sure heat is one thing that a lot of people are talking about up there.
Yeah, Johnny, good afternoon to you. 91 degrees ambient air temperature right now in Loudon, New Hampshire, which is just pretty crazy for this part of the country and this time of the year. But it was hot like this yesterday for the Xfinity Series race, and it will be very, very hot in the grandstands today. But in the race cars, they can get up to 140, 150 degrees today. So it's a short race, but it's going to be a punishing one when it comes to the amount of heat the drivers are going to have to deal with.
Pat, I think the big question everybody's asking right now is what's going to be the situation with the PJ1 and what's been said about it so far throughout its use. I mean, been a lot of racing on that track this weekend. So far, what's been the result?
Well, you never know on race day when the Cup cars are out here and they're competing for points what you're going to get. But here's what we've had so far, Jeff. This adhesive material, PJ1, that helps the car grip in the corners, was spread from the middle of the racetrack all the way up to the wall in both ends of the racetrack. And the reason they did that, they're trying to obviously enhance cars to create another lane of racing. Right in the middle of the racetrack, they actually didn't treat the racetrack. And then on the bottom, they treated it. So there is a lane. If you're watching this afternoon, you're going to see a dark spot, a dark part of the racetrack up above, and a dark part of the racetrack below, and then you'll see kind of a gray area there in the middle. Most of the drivers yesterday used the traditional line around this racetrack. It meant that it was very hard to pass, number one. Number two, that PJ1 that they spread up there next to the wall really did not come into play whatsoever. Now, does that mean anything for today? I think we'll have to wait and see. I think the line will move up as the drivers put more and more rubber. The way that adhesive material works, the hotter it gets, the better it gets. So I think there'll be plenty enough room for some passing here, Jeff, but you know how difficult it is just getting through these corners, much less trying to make aggressive passes at the same time.
Hi, Pat. 5 of the last 6 winners at New Hampshire have qualified 8th or worse. In 2017, Kyle Larson started 39th and finished 2nd. He's also starting from the rear today. Do you expect that he'll be able to move on the outside and make up, a significant amount of spots and finish in the top 5?
Well, I certainly feel like his car is good enough to finish in the top 10. But admittedly, by his own words to me on Friday, he said, Pat, right now we're points racing. What we're trying to do is score as many points as we can to put us in the best possible position for the playoffs. They're more interested and anxious to get those points right now than they are to get a race win. So to answer your question, I don't think there's any question that they'll get to the top 10 today if everything, not being involved in any kind of accidents, that sort of thing. But what they're really wanting to do is points race. And they're not by themselves. There are a strong group of cars that know they can't beat Kyle Busch, that know they can't beat Joey Logano, know that they can't beat Brad Keselowski and some of the cars that have scored wins this year. So their strategy now is get those points because they know they're going to make the playoffs. And what they want is as much insurance in the playoffs with those extra stage points or stage wins to, help them through those first rounds of the playoffs. So I expect Larson to run well here today. And they may try some strategy early to be able to go up there and get some of those points that are awarded with each of the 2 stages before we get to the checkered flag.
Pat, we've heard some interviews from several drivers talking about how difficult it still is to pass, on this racetrack. Yesterday during the Xfinity race, saw a lot of pushing and shoving, especially right there toward the end of the race between Paul Menard and particularly Harrison Burton, the young rookie, got turned around by Paul Menard. Can we expect more of the same today? Is this racetrack going to bring out a little bit more of a frustration level when you can't get around somebody?
Well, Jeff, I think that all bets are off when it comes to driver etiquette at this point of the season. And what I mean by that is that you're going to use every tactic you possibly can to try to put yourself in a position to do exactly what I just talked about a minute ago. And that's be relative in that top 10, get those stage points, et cetera. The restarts at this racetrack are really tricky. It's a flat racetrack, and not that all restarts aren't hard to do, but when it comes to, really protecting your position and not spinning your tires, particularly if you're out there, on a quickie caution and you don't come in and take tires, you can spin your tires on the restart. Everybody's going to be on top of each other today. So restarts are going to be key here. The initial start of the race will be key. You got Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch on the front row. And those 2 guys right there don't mind swapping some paint with each other at any portion of the race. So I think there's going to be a lot of aggression here today. And the guys that can stay cool and take care of their equipment today, I think are obviously going to be relative, and that tends to, you've heard me say it the last few weeks on this show that veterans probably get the nod over rookies here. I would expect a lot of the same, and we got a lot of those veterans that are starting at the rear of the field.
Yep, going to be fun to watch. Hey, Pat Patterson, thank you for joining us. Try to stay cool, brother.
Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, that's Pat Patterson again from a very hot New Hampshire Motor Speedway. We talked at the beginning of that and throughout the show about the PJ1, about the track bite compound. Well, our odds-on favorite today, of course, is Kyle Busch. He's at the top of the odds there, but he also is on top of this PJ1. And here's what he had to say about the compound and what it may be and what it may mean to the racing.
Yeah, so if it was cold outside, let's say it was in the, 50s or something here, track temp being probably in the 70s or something, it would take a little bit for that to get burn in, for it to get warmed up, for it to activate, for it to become stickier. You know, I guess the best explanation I can give you is this is going against code for Mars, but Jolly Rancher, right? Like if it's a cold Jolly Rancher, it's probably sticky, but it's not that sticky. When it gets hot, right, you leave it inside the cockpit of your car, it's going to be really sticky. That's essentially the comparison I have.
I guess he could have used M&Ms, or they could melt and be sticky too. But anyway, but good point though. The hotter it gets, the stickier it gets. But also, you know, at the same time though, Jeff, you get to a point where the track gets so hot, these guys are squirreling around a little bit. That is a flat track. It's almost for a driver when you go into a high banked. It's almost like you have a cushion to push against when you're going into a high banked turn. Here, some of the veteran drivers may be looked at as having quite a bit of an advantage because you don't have that wall. It's a flat track. You got to have car control.
You got to have car control. I want to remind you one thing. M&M's melts in your mouth, not in your hands.
Not in your hands. Okay, but what about the track?
But the track itself, I mean, if you watch anything, pay particular attention today, you will see where a lot of these teams are dropping a lot of left side air pressure. We're talking about having maybe as little as 8 pounds of air in the left side tire. Some people have had problems with this, and it's all about that banking that's not available on this flat racetrack. You're trying to get more grip from the left side tires by kind of dragging them rather than having them go into the banking where they can kind of put down some side load on the car. So a very challenging racetrack, trying to carry a lot of rolling speed through the center. And, John, that's where the biggest challenge comes from. If you can get your car to where it gets down in there with good speed and will rotate and be able to roll through that corner and be able to put the gas down, that's what makes you really, you know, king of the hill up there.
When we come back to Racers Odds, our bookmaking expert, Jeff Coyandro, will help us dive right in to the matchups. We've talked a lot about the individual odds to win the race so far. We'll dive into matchups and groups when we come back in just a moment.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
We like to think of it as the multivitamin of digestive health.
It's the only product to combine all natural ingredients known for the digestive health properties into a single patented product. Praxid also comes in easy-to-carry packs. Praxid relieves, restores, and maintains a healthy digestive system. Praxid is available here for only $39.95. Shipping and handling is free, and your money back is guaranteed.
To take advantage of this special radio offer, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735. Again, 1-800-829-5735.
The Edge, only on the Vegas Stats and Information Network.
How you feeling? I'm feeling good. How you doing, bro? I'm feeling good, man. How you doing? How you doing?
The Edge, weekdays 3 p.m. Eastern.
The Raiders have made some sensational headlines, but I don't think you or I or anybody who seriously handicaps the NFL saying, yeah, the Raiders are going to be a playoff. I'm talking about public, more about public team, especially in Vegas with the excitement with that team going to be here in 2020.
Only on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. Sirius XM Channel 204.
It's crazy.
It is.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSIN, changing the way you watch sports.
We're back with more Racers Odds.
And welcome back, everybody, to Racers Odds. It's time now to dive headfirst into these head-to-head matchups. And Jeff Hammond, what happens, though, sometimes right before a race, things will change in a hurry. And we got guys going to the back of the pack. 5 drivers will start in the back.
Yeah, we got 5 guys. Even though they qualified, folks, they had to go to backup cars early in the week, so they'll have to go to the rear of the field. Started with number 1, Kyle Larson. Even though he qualified 15th. William Byron, Denny Hamlin, along with Ryan Newman, and obviously Alex Bowman. He had a problem late and at practice session, didn't get a chance to get his car back out on the racetrack, did not get a qualifying time, so he will be starting 37th no matter what.
All right, so that's something to keep in mind. Jeff Cuyandro, let's take a look at the matchups. Let's start with matchups number 1, as we have several different groups here to take care of, and also some very interesting ones along the way. The first one we look at is 2 of our favorites when it comes to individual drivers, but here we have Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr., certainly 2 of the faves.
Yeah, without question, John. When you take a look at this matchup, you've got Kyle Busch at -140. He was second fastest in happy hour for a 5 and 10 lap consecutive average run. He'll be starting second and, looks to be very strong. Conversely, Truex at +120, the underdog, was 4th fastest in a 5 and 10 lap happy hour average, and he'll be starting 6th.
Okay, so here we have an interesting matchup. Of course, Kyle Busch again, but this time Kevin Harvick. This time last year, Harvick had already won 6 races. He's a 3-time winner at New Hampshire. And Jeff C., Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, Busch at -170.
Yeah, Kyle Busch actually opened up at -155. So there's been steam put on Kyle Busch, most recently as the weekend has progressed. In his last 7 races at New Hampshire, he has 2 wins, 550 laps led, and he has the second most driver points with 272. Conversely, Harvick in the same 7 races has 2 wins, and he's led 248 laps with 241 driver points. So just slightly below the numbers that Kyle Busch has output.
Hammond, something interesting about Martin Truex Jr. as we see him in another one of our matchups here in our first group of matchups. Martin Truex and Kevin Harvick. Truex at -130 in this matchup. Martin Truex has led more laps than any other non-winner at this race. Led 744 laps at this racetrack without a win. It seems like this year the modus of operation for Martin Truex is checking those things off his list.
List.
Yeah, the bucket list. Never
yeah.
won on a short track. Well, he goes and wins on a short track. Never won at Loudon, New Hampshire. Maybe this is an interesting one to look at. Nonetheless, there he is paired up with Kevin Harvick, another one of the favorites. But that might be an interesting one to look at there.
And I think that's one of those kind of matchups that have me a little bit confused, because I was talking to Jeff C. earlier before he came on the air that he likes this matchup. And I mean, I'm like you, and I'm looking at that number saying, and the guy has never won at his own home track, and you kind of cringe when you think that way and you look at the numbers, because you know that sooner or later he's going to break through. And here again, when I look at Martin Truex Jr. and Kevin Harvick, Jeff, I'm looking at 2 guys that, hey, we got a couple of real losers here, don't we? As far as guys right now can't kind of get it going at this racetrack. I mean, hadn't won in 2019 in Harvick, and never won at his home track in Truex Jr.
Well, while that's true, Jeff, if you take a look at Truex over his last 7 New Hampshire races, he has the best average finish at 8th place of anybody racing. He's led, like you said, he's led 596 laps in that same span of races, and he scored 277 driver points, which is the most of anybody on the circuit. So when you put that together with his weekend progression being very fast in happy hour, I like the way Truex has been quietly very good going into the race.
All right, here's the first matchup involving our pole sitter, Brad Keselowski. He is paired up with Denny Hamlin, and it's been eventful somewhat for Denny Hamlin so far this weekend. What do you think about that one, Jeff Cuyandro, about Brad Keselowski and Denny Hamlin giving just basically starting position?
Yeah, well, you know what, John? This is a great line, a great matchup to study, because this matchup opened up at minus 110 each. So now we see Keselowski at minus 190, Hamlin at plus 160. Hamlin, as we know, is starting in the rear. Keselowski's on the pole. So a significant portion of Keselowski moving to minus 190 from 110 is based on his starting position gap over Denny Hamlin.
So as we move on to our next matchup, that pits two teammates together in Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano. Joey Logano has certainly had a lot of success at what is definitely his hometown track, being from Littletown, Connecticut, just down the road. He won his first race there, but for Joey Logano, that was seen as somewhat of an anomaly. It was a gamble. It was a rain-shortened race. Then he went back there and won again to prove it. He's a two-time winner here, and he thinks past success could have an outcome, could have an effect on the outcome today.
Yeah, definitely. This racetrack is one that, for me earlier in my career is the most frustrating track for me to go to, which always was awful because it's my home track and it's where you want to run the best, right? But for years, it was the most challenging track for me to get my head wrapped around. But like you said, there's tracks like New Hampshire or Richmond or Martinsville that seems like, and even Sonoma is a little bit like this, is once you get something that works and the driver and the team really understand what you need to be good, not just in practice, not just in qualifying, but in the race when you have a long run or trying to pass cars and what traffic and restarts are. And once you kind of figure out that balance, because it's never perfect here. It never drives the way you want it to. If it does for 3 laps, and then something goes wrong, whether your front or your rear tires give up. So trying to figure out that compromise here with this flat corners like that, it seems like once somebody gets their head wrapped around it and understands it, they get it for a while. And it doesn't matter if they're racing tricycles or cup cars out there, they have it figured out. And that's just kind of how this place is. And I still don't feel like I have it figured out by no means, but we get closer and closer to where we need to be.
All right, so if you want to just take what Joey Logano said there, you got to like somebody like Kevin Harvick, who has won very recently, won in 2018 and 2016 there. So for both of the Jeffs, let's throw back up the rest of our Group 1 of head-to-head matchups. Jeff Coyandro, who do you like in this one? Is there one, or do you say stay away from the whole group? Is there any matchup in particular that you like?
Well, I think if you evaluate the whole Group 1, I think that at least I point toward Martin Truex at minus 130 over Kevin Harvick. I like his past success recently. I also think that Martin Truex has sort of struggled like we saw last week at Kentucky, and I believe we're getting back to a more traditional package that he's very familiar with. Quietly, he's been very good this weekend, and I expect him to race awfully well.
Hammond, what do you think?
Well, that was one of the conversations we had between Jeff and I, and that was the fact that I'm leaning toward Kevin Harvick this weekend, and so we got an interesting matchup right now. So I'm going to stick with this this same kind of thought process. If you've got a gut feeling and a little bit else, my extra belief is the experience that Kevin Harvick brings to the table, coming off a big win last year. They're trying to rectify and get their ship back at the head of the pack instead of toward the middle ways. I think it could wind up being their day.
All right, let's move on to our matchups, our group number 2 of the matchups, and get some other drivers involved here. A couple of past winners at Loudon, Clint Boyer and Kurt Busch. And Kurt Busch, Jeff Coyandro, he's been, he's on fire coming off a win, and it just seems like that team is very confident right now. Goes in plus 105 with Clint Boyer on that first matchup. What do you think?
Well, I think Kurt Busch is an attractive underdog here. When you look at his past 7 New Hampshire races, he has an average finish of just 15.5, but he has 4 top 10s and 196 points earned. Consequently, or conversely, when you look at Clint Boyer, his average finish is 22nd, and he's only had 2 top 10s while scoring 134 driver points in that same group of matches.
So when it comes to the Busch brothers, each of them has 3 victories here at this racetrack. That's only one shy of your all-time leader, which is Jeff Gordon, no longer active. But out of the active drivers, Kyle and Kurt each have 3 victories, and Kurt Busch believes that past success is something you can build on at this track.
Yeah, there's certain tracks that when you find a nice setup, that it stays hot for a while, and you're able to use it the next time you come back because not much changed, whether it's been aero or the tires. I remember in '04 when I swept the 2 races here, the second race had a lot of weather issues, and we didn't get a lot of practice time. So we were all forced to use the setup that we used at the first race. And so that helped us as a race-winning team be able to sweep the races that year. This track's similar a bit to Bristol. If you find that right setup, it works for a little bit.
Yeah, it's worked at Bristol for Kurt Busch for quite some time, or actually anybody with the last name of Busch. So, Jeff, if you look at some of these things, let's stick here with Kurt Busch for a little while. We have him paired up here against Ryan Blaney, Eric Almirola, and then also the one up top, Clint Boyer. Any of those you like in particular?
I think I'd have to take him as an underdog against Clint Boyer. I just like Kurt Busch's recency. And again, he's our winningest driver in terms of head-to-head ROI so far this season. So I'm going to continue with the hot hand as an underdog and take Kurt Busch.
So he's one of those drivers, Jeff, that when it comes to matchups, there are a couple of drivers that really tend to do better in the head-to-head matchups. We're not talking necessarily about finishing positions on the racetrack, but when you look at a few drivers, there's a few that are ahead of the pack so far this season of winning these head-to-head matchups.
Yeah, without question. And conversely, there are drivers who have not won very many head-to-head matchups. A couple of drivers that come to mind right out of the gate are Kyle Larson, whose record is 10-36. Another driver who's struggled on head-to-head matchups is Eric Jones, who's just 9-18. Both of note, though, have picked it up lately and appear to have sort of stop the losing streak. So you can look at drivers who have performed well and bet for them, or you can bet against drivers who have not done well.
So in that matchups number 2, we leaning towards Clint Boyer and Kurt Busch. Let's move on to our matchups number 3, where we have some other drivers involved here, some names we haven't taken on quite yet so far. Eric Almirola was involved in several of the other matchups. Hammond, are there any matchup here in this grouping of number 3? Jimmy Johnson, Alex Bowman, Eric Jones, and Kyle Larson. A lot of these guys have had very eventful weekends so far.
A lot of them have, and for that reason, I mean, I'm not really seeing anybody there that I've got a warm and fuzzy about because it's just been so unpredictable and how good they can be and how frustrated they must be at the same time about being here in New Hampshire.
And Jeff Coyando, really quickly, while we're on this list of matchups, just for the education of our wagerers out there, Eric Almirola and Eric Jones. Eric Jones being at minus 135. What does that mean for me in terms of throwing $10 down on Eric Jones? What does the minus 135 mean? What does the plus 115 mean?
So let's take Eric Almirola at plus 115. If you put down $10 on him and he happened to win the matchup, you would profit $11.50. Plus, you would get your original 10 back. Now, Eric Jones, if you wanted to win $10, you would have to put down $13.50. So it cost $1.35 to win $1 on Eric Jones since he's the favorite in this matchup.
Okay, so glad to clear that up. It's always good to remind people out there what those numbers mean next to these head-to-head matchups. But also another one, fairly interesting, William Byron. It seems like he just keeps scratching the surface, getting closer and closer, as does Daniel Suarez. Here's two of those drivers, man. They're hungry for that win. And by the same token, though, it looks like they're fairly far apart when it comes to the separation.
Yeah, and I think a big part of the reason why they're so far apart is because William Byron is going to have to start from the rear. And he wasn't particularly fast in happy hour. He was just 23rd in single lap speed, and he was 20th overall in 10 consecutive laps. So Byron has not shown the same kind of speed that we're used to seeing the past several weeks.
Hammond, anybody here on group number 3 you like in particular that you would risk some of your hard-earned money on?
No.
Stay away from all of them.
I like I said, I don't really see anybody here that I feel through watching and practicing and everything and looking at the results. I'm real uncertain about anybody I'd feel like I don't put my money on.
All right, so the Clint Boyer-Kurt Busch matchup is a good one we're keeping an eye on. Also, the Kyle Busch-Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch-Martin Truex out of the group number one. Good matchups to keep an eye on this afternoon. Now, we got to take a quick break here on Racers Odds. When we come back, we'll dive into the groups, pitting 4 drivers against each other. We'll tell you what the numbers are on there and where some of the sharp money might be in terms of placing money on the group wagers. Stay with us, everybody.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSiN, changing the way you watch sports.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Gone Racing.
They're still wheel to wheel.
The weekly NASCAR show that gets you ready for this week's big race and more.
Oh, yeah!
Take a ride with us to Victory Lane on Gone Racing.
We just got these lines last night. It was plus 700 on Brad Keselowski. He's already down to plus 550, so I think we know where the money is.
It's going that way.
And that's where my money would have been, too.
Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern on VSiN, Channel 204, and SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90.
Great job.
Do you have an idea for an invention or new product? Do you think companies would be interested in your idea? Do you want to try to get a patent? Then call InventHelp now. InventHelp keeps your idea confidential and explains every step of the invention process. We create professional materials representing your idea and submit it to companies who are looking for new ideas. We have more than 9,000 companies who have agreed to review ideas in confidence. If a company shows interest in manufacturing your invention, we can negotiate on your behalf. We have helped over 10,000 clients receive patents. We also offer services including 3D modeling and animation demonstrating your idea, prototyping services, and we use state-of-the-art technology to show InventHelp client ideas to additional companies. Join the thousands of people just like you who chose InventHelp to pursue their idea. We are experienced. We are working for you. We are InventHelp.
Call us for free information at 1-800-542-6751, 1-800-542-6751, 1-800-542-6751.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
And now more Racers Odds with John Roberts, Jeff Hammond, and Jeff Caliandro.
And welcome back once again, everyone, to Racers Odds. We're here to tell you where the sharp money is when it comes to wagering on America's top form of motorsports racing. That, of course, NASCAR's Monster Energy Cup Series. And now we will move from matchups going into groups. Jeff Caliandro, group number A, or not number A, group A. Can you say number A? Some people do.
Well, I know that. I'm not an English teacher, so I'm not getting caught on that. I defer to anybody else.
Now that we're done with that, Group A has Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., Kevin Harvick, and Brad Keselowski. Here are your favorites, Jeff, but also by the same token, though, Kevin Harvick at plus 350 in that group. I find that interesting.
Well, it is interesting. He's going to have to make up a starting deficit as he's starting 14th, which is deeper than the rest of the group. Not by much, but the cars between him and the rest of the guys in the group are going to be tough to pass. But he's not had quite the same progressive form as the other three. Kyle Busch at plus 180 is just too short of a price. But when you look at this group from a weekend progression standpoint, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex, and Brad Keselowski have all been very similar. And I think based on odds value and past success at New Hampshire, there can be a strong case made for Martin Truex at plus 275.
Yeah, and when you talk about progression, Jeff, when you talk before any on-track action happened, actually for Brad Keselowski, his odds have been cut in half or doubled, however you want to look at it, from where he started out before anybody got on track.
Yeah, he opened up at plus 410. So we saw how well, when he qualified so well, his odds got chopped. And then he performed quite well during the practice session. So with all those things combined, he's leveled the playing field of this group.
Group B, let's move on to that, where we find Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, and Clint Boyer. This time around, Hammond, these drivers are pretty equal, and I think that might make this one this group a little bit more difficult.
I don't think it makes it difficult. I think it kind of like it makes it easier in some ways of looking at it because of the fact that they are so equal. But I think there is a clear-cut advantage, at least in my opinion, based off of where he qualified and how well he's run here in the past. Somebody like Joey Logano.
Jeff C., what do you think about Group B?
Well, I think it's a tough group, and I'm not sure I agree with the line movement, as Clint Boyer opened up at plus 360, and now is down to plus 250. While he was best amongst the group in happy hour speeds, he does have the worst average finish. So I sort of point away from him with all that movement on him to win the group.
Okay, Group C, we have been discussing this pretty much all day long, actually, before we even took to the air here, that this was an interesting one to look at. Had you watched Racers Odds last weekend, you would have known how high we all were on Kurt Busch heading into Kentucky. But this one heading into Loudon, we've got Kurt Busch, Ryan Blaney, Eric Almirola, and Eric Jones. It looks as if here you may be kind of looking at Kurt Busch, Jeff, and Ryan Blaney head-to-head.
Well, I think this is a tough group. Ryan Blaney at plus 165, the odds are just too low. But this is really based on his happy hour performance. He swept every happy hour category from single lap to as much as 15 lap runs. So you got to look at Ryan Blaney and just see how strong he's going to be. Kurt Busch, consequently, I think looks good, but I just don't think that there's value on him to beat three other very good drivers today.
All right, Group D, Hammond, let's take a look at this. Jimmy Johnson, you never know when that team is really going to pop back up again and surprise us because you can never write them off. Daniel Suarez has had some moments of brilliance. Alex Bowman, starting from the back of the pack, has just had a disastrous weekend so far. Teammate William Byron at plus 490.
Well, again, he's got to go to the back of the pack, and I think Jeff already talked about it earlier. His overall practice laps have not been that great. So I can see and understand totally where they are coming from with having him ranked like he is right now. His performance this weekend is indicative of this number, I believe.
All right, let's move on to Group E, where we find another three-time Loudon winner in Ryan Newman, and also a seven-time pole sitter at Loudon, Austin Dillon, Ricky Stenhouse, and Chris Buescher. Jeff, I feel like there's a lot of unknowns in this group.
Yeah, there definitely is. But as we commented a little bit earlier, I like the way Ryan Newman has been exceeding expectations and racing very well recently. I think this group is basically a toss-up, but I like his overall value. He's starting from the rear today, but I don't believe that's quite as terrible as it's made out to be. There are only 37 cars racing today, and I expect Newman to pass about 10 of those cars very quickly.
And as we move on to Group F, Paul Menard, Daniel Hemrick, Matt DiBenedetto, and Ryan Preece. Guys, Matt DiBenedetto came in this weekend at 1,000 to 1, moving up to 500 to 1, if I am not mistaken. I'm sorry, 500 to 1 is where he came in. Now Matt DiBenedetto finds himself 100 to 1, and again, Jeff, it's because of the on-track performance that happened with practice and qualifying.
It is, but I think part of the scary factor when you look at Matt DiBenedetto as a favorite, is he had repeated tire trouble in Happy Hour, and I think that makes him a very dicey favorite of this group. You have Menard, who consequently ran the Xfinity race, and he has the best average finish amongst comparable races this season. So when you just look at the group overall, I think Menard has very marginal value at plus 220.
No, and I agree with you on that completely. When you see Paul Menard currently where he's located at from the Xfinity race yesterday, he did extremely good as far as being consistent all day long. He understands the racetrack. He knows kind of like what to deal with as far as with the PJ1 and the tires are concerned. And on top of that, when you look at the guys he's going up again, matched up against him, particularly even Ryan Priest, hometown boy here, never won a race here at New Hampshire in modifieds or anything else. I mean, he's always fast there, but he can't close the deal. I don't think he closes the deal today. If I'm looking at maybe a really an easy one here, I look at Paul Menard outclassing all three of these guys.
So as we look at our groups on the whole, guys, is there a group you like? Is this one of those weeks again where the payoff out of any of these groups is just not good enough to make it advisable to go into one of the group wagers?
Well, I think you got to be careful anytime you venture into a group wager, because the more drivers that are involved in a wager, the higher the sports book takeout is. So like Steve Mackinnon was saying earlier, your VIG goes up, and that's ultimately the commission you have to pay. So I think you have to be careful with groups. But if I were to probably bet one, I think I would look at Group B and take Ryan Newman at plus 295. And I also think that there is some limited value on William Byron in Group D at plus 490. It's just too high of a number.
Yeah, absolutely. So every week here on Racers Odds, we tend to learn a lot from our odds-making expert, Jeff Quiandro. And, Jeff, we have a term here that I don't know personally all that much about when we take a look at betting structure. When we say betting structure, what do we mean, and what does it mean to the person that's out there trying to get going wagering on NASCAR?
Well, I think it's very easy to be sort of blown over by which driver you think is better or can win a matchup versus another driver without maybe looking at the numbers behind it first. And as a new bettor, this is something that can happen very easily. So let's just take an example and look at something. And I want to just point out how betting on favorites really is a difficult proposition when it comes to trying to turn a profit. If we look at our matchup of Ryan Blaney, who's minus 180, versus Eric Almirola at plus 150, if you were to bet from these odds, we know that it takes an $18 bet on Ryan Blaney just to win $10. Well, let's say that you made a bet on a matchup driver at minus 180 10 times over the course of the year. That's $180 that you put into these bets. So at a price of minus 180, your driver is going to have to win that matchup 7 out of 10 times just to turn a very small profit of 8.8% or $16. If he loses any more than 3 matchups out of the 10, you're going to have a net loss. Now, just conversely, if you were looking at betting a driver at minus 110, okay, you only need to win 6 out of those 10 to turn the same $16 profit. But because you're betting on a driver that's minus 110, you're risking $70 less over the course of 10 bets. Okay, and that works out to almost 15% profit. So you have to be very careful the way you bet favorites. And in a sport like NASCAR, where random elements so frequently intersect with very tight competition, the bettor should beware when it comes to laying big prices. Just as one example, at New Hampshire last season, favorites who were an average of minus 130 went just 8-8 in their matchups, and that was a loss of 12%.
All right, Jeff, thank you very much. Very interesting to hear the thought behind some of the numbers. We got to grab a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to put our collective money where our mouths are and tell you who we think and where we think the sharp money is this week. We're each going to pick one bet, one wager, and tell you where, if we had to, we would put something on the line here as NASCAR gets ready to go 301 miles up at 301 laps rather up at Loudon, New Hampshire in the Northeast in a very hot, slick 1 mile racetrack. We'll be back in a second.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSiN, changing the way you watch sports.
Before the pros tee off for this week's golf tournament, the VSiN experts help you make the cut on long shots.
When I profiled all the players for this tournament, I said Schauffele's number one on my board. I like the odds, 25-1. Let's go ahead and play X.
Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds are your weekly betting caddies and help you cash those tickets.
Don't be afraid to maybe take some longer odd guys.
Don't miss Long Shots, Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern on VSiN, the only golf betting show you need, exclusively on Sirius XM Channel 204.
Hi, this is Doug Rice for the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Do you use the expensive blue or yellow pills to charge your sex life? Are you thinking about it? What if we could promise you the same results for less than $3 a pill? If you're paying $20 a pill for the other pills, you're getting taken to the cleaners. Call On Call Pharmacy right now and save as much as $700. 800-884-7919. On Call Pharmacy delivers the exact same results for less than $3. You'll save more than $16 a pill for the same results. And right now, radio callers will get 44 blue or yellow pills for $120 with free discreet shipping. You can save more than $700 off pharmacy prices. Call On Call Pharmacy now and take advantage of this special offer. 800-884-7919. Charge your sex life now and save a ton of money. Call now and get your 44 pills and save over $700 and qualify for free shipping. Stop overpaying and call right now. 800-884-7919. 800-884-7919. 800-884-7919.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
It's more Racers Odds.
And welcome back, everybody. Just like the race itself, the odds are always changing. And right now, as we get closer and closer to green flag time, which is the cutoff, of course, for when you can place a wager, we've had some movement going on when it comes to the odds about who an individual winning the race. Let's now go back to Jeff Coyandro. And Jeff, a whole lot of shaking going on, if you will.
Yeah, there sure is, especially if you're not Kyle Busch or Truex or Keselowski. Pretty much everybody else has moved. Kevin Harvick is now 8-1, up from 7-1. Denny Hamlin went from 16-1 to now 20-1, along with Joey Logano. Same move. Eric Jones was 18-1. He's now 25-1. So when you look at this and you see this kind of movement, but you don't see movement on drivers who were the extreme favorites like Kyle Busch and Martin Truex, you know that there's probably an overwhelming amount of money on those upper favorites.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes those odds move along the way. So each week here on Racers Odds, we try to pick one individual matchup or individual winner or group that we think is a pretty good place to put anything you're looking at wagering on. And so for that, we want to start out with the expert, Jeff Coyandro. Out of this group that we've gone over today, Jeff, what do you think? Where's the sharp money? What do you like the best in terms of the wagers that are available?
Well, I think, you got to go back to the matchups. If you have any devices about trying to turn a profit, it really begins and ends with the driver matchups. And in this case, I like Martin Truex minus 130, which is a high number to lay in my opinion, but I feel that he's worth it in this case. So I like Martin Truex at minus 130 over Kevin Harvick at plus 110. And the other matchup I like is Kurt Busch at plus 105 over Clint Boyer at minus 125.
Okay, those are very interesting ones. Going to keep a close eye on those, and we'll see what comes of those when the checkered flag waves. So now, Jeff Hammond, what do you like the best out of these wagers that we put out today?
Well, I'm looking at the guy that's getting ready to try to get off of basically the snide, and I'm talking about Kevin Harvick. He hadn't got a win in 2019. And, folks, one of the reasons why I like him there is I was listening to one of his interviews earlier in the week, and I kind of made me decide this is the man I'm gonna put my money on.
Racing is a lot like other sports. You go through spells of capitalizing on things and having good cars and mediocre cars and circumstances, and I think that part of the sport is those streaks come and go, and at certain racetracks, at RCR we had a lot of good flat track races at Richmond and Loudon, and we only won here one time, and I thought this was one of our better tracks. So I think as you look at different racetracks, I feel like we've always run fairly well here. I feel like we probably should have been to victory lane 10 times here. But you look at the results, and it's just hard to win these races. But over the last few years, obviously it's gone okay, and we've been on the right side of it.
And guys, when you look at what Kevin Harvick has done over the past few years, you got to look at this team and say you're just not going to keep them down for too long. Hammond, they're going to eventually win, I feel.
No, I think they will, and I think that anytime that you look at a guy that's a former winner, especially one that won last year, he's been pretty consistent this weekend. And the thing about Kevin, I've always learned it watching him, year in and year out. He doesn't always tip his hand about how good he really is and how ready to race he can be. So I kind of feel like maybe they're being just a little bit on the down low, and I look for him to have a really strong day, and I think he'll be able to get that number 4 car to victory lane, in spite of Martin Truex Jr., big guy.
So I was gonna ask Jeff if you agreed with Mr. Hammond, but I don't believe so.
Well, here's what I would say. So he went from 7-1 to win the race. Now he's 8-1. So your value's already increased. Okay, he's a 2-time winner at 8-1. How often are you going to see Kevin Harvick at that tall of a price where he's won already twice? Here's the other thing. He has 5 top 5s, which is the best in the last 7 races at New Hampshire of any driver on the circuit.
Okay, so granted, our experts, Jeff Coyandro and Steve Makinen, on this program today have said probably the worst place out of the group to put your money, if there is one, is in the groups. They're the hardest to pick and the least profitable. So with that in mind, yes, I still am going to look at a group today, despite the fact that the experts told me not to.
I'm getting ready to say now, are you trying to say you're putting your smart money there?
Well, there was just one in particular I liked, and I wanted to bring this one up. If you go back to our groups and which drivers were paired against one another, I like this one particular group, and I like one particular driver out of them. It was our Group C that we were looking at. It included Kurt Busch, Ryan Blaney, Eric Almirola, and Eric Jones. And when I looked at this matchup, I feel as if with starting position, what has happened so far this weekend, what kind of cars we're looking at, that it's basically a matchup between Kurt Busch and Ryan Blaney. And therefore, it pushes it into what I see as a head-to-head matchup, not necessarily a group, but with what's out there, Kurt Busch at plus 280 seems to me to be at least somewhat wise, perhaps not sharp, perhaps not smart, but somewhat wise in terms of placing a bet there. And Jeff, any backup you can give me here would be greatly appreciated.
Well, you know what? It's really easy to give you backup on Kurt Busch in this group. And the reason why is because if you look at his happy hour progression, okay, he was fast single lap, he was faster 5 laps, and he was fastest over 10. Now, not fastest of anybody running, but he was fastest for his progression. So anytime you see a driver trend up as the laps get longer, you know that that's a good sign.
I'll go one step further. I like the fact that he's got Big Mo on his side right now. You can feel it coming out of the driver. His track record proves he can win at this racetrack, 3 wins. The fact that he coming in here on a mental high, an emotional high, it's just I think it's huge at this moment. I think the team will play above their head one more time, and they'll put good fast pit stops on them and strategy as far as tires are concerned. Look for these guys to roll the dice right now. They're locked into the playoffs, so they can be a little bit reckless, John. So you may have something going for you.
So when it comes to wagering, perhaps on a baseball game or a football game, the baseball game, it's all human nature. It's all it's all up to the human there. And you have 90 feet to the bases and 60 feet 6 inches to the mound. But when we race at different venues on different weekends, it changes the betting landscape. It changes the picture. In this case, we have a very short race on a short track, 301 circuits around this Loudon, New Hampshire Speedway. So therefore, Hammond, when you talk about who qualified well, those 2 qualifiers are Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski. They're the ones to look for there because they're starting up front. On the other side of the coin, we have some drivers and some good ones that are going to the back of the pack that they certainly can make it up. They just have a little bit less time and fewer pit stops to do it.
They got a big challenge in front of them. That's right. It's going to take some strategy. It's going to take, honestly, they're going to need some cautions. They're going to need multiple cautions. So they don't need for this race to go, green flag for a long period of time and to get strung out and them get away from the rest of the field. The other part is you've got 2 of the best pit crews in the business going up against each other. But advantage right now is Brad Keselowski with that number 1 pit stall. We saw yesterday during the course of the Xfinity race, Austin Cindric qualified on the pole several times, came in 4th, 5th, and was able to pick up multiple spots coming off of pit road during the course of the Xfinity race. Watch for Brad Keselowski. If he's a little bit off early on, come down pit road, gain some spots back when they make a pit stop.
So just to recap, we're putting back up the head-to-head matchups and some of the other groups up on the screen for you as we go back to Jeff Coyandro. You spoke earlier in the program about betting structure. So this wagering game is not just all about who wins this race. There are all kinds of different factors to take in, all kind of different ways you can structure your wagering to try to get the highest profit out of it.
Yeah, there sure is. And, anytime you're trying to attain a higher profit, you're also putting yourself at a greater risk. Now, not monetarily, but in terms of actually realizing and winning the bet. So I think a lot has to be taken under consideration, and you have to decide ultimately how strongly you feel about a driver or drivers. If you think there's 3 drivers that can win, well, then it probably makes sense to spread the money around on each of them in more of a winning fashion, like to win the race. If you think it's one driver's show, then you can bet on them in a number of different ways.
And also, one thing you can bet upon, Jeff Hammond, is the fact that NASCAR fans are emotional. They are very invested in their sport. And therefore, when it comes to wagering, it might be difficult for that hardcore NASCAR fan to look away because they like their drivers. They follow their drivers, and they believe that they can win.
Well, I think the thing is right now, and Jeff's been trying to educate me about stuff like this, is just like if I believe in Kevin Harvick strong enough to win this race today, would I not want to look at him in the group situation that we see in Group A? Also, a head-to-head matchup against, like he and I, Martin Truex Jr. versus Kevin Harvick. Do I spread that money around there and that kind of a situation? If you're that kind of a fan, or do I look elsewhere? Do I look at it like a guy like Ryan Blaney? Can he come in there and take some of the speed we've seen in practice? Could he wind up being a surprise to New Hampshire, victory lane today?
And we saw how these odds can shake. You saw a moment ago that Brad Keselowski now is plus 450, came in at plus 900 to win this race in terms of single drivers and their odds to win. So that has moved, and it has shaken throughout the course of this weekend, depending on how these drivers do in practice. So, Jeff Coyandro, that is one thing to take into consideration, but also if you do make a wager, one thing we know for sure is that whatever the odds are at the current time, that's where your wager stands. Your wager doesn't move. So there may be a great value to somebody who made their bet before on Brad Keselowski, and now their potential winnings have gone up.
Oh, without question. Timing your wagers and wagering at the best possible price is one of the most valuable tools that a handicapper can choose to exercise. So it pays a lot of dividends to watch the lines, shop the drivers around, and make your best investment.
Jeff, thank you so much for the insight today. We certainly appreciate it. Want to send a huge thanks out to Steve Makinen from the Visa Network, who gave us some really good insight into how he makes his simulation work and how often it comes out to tell people a lot about what's going on. So, Jeff Hammond, if you just look at your gut, if you just look at your heart, what do you think? Is this going to be a clean and green race and one of the favorites win, or we'll be looking at another different winner for the fourth time in 4 weeks?
I think we're going to be looking at a different winner. I think that's the reason why I picked Kevin Harvick. I think he could wind up being a spoiler today, but it's going to be a hard-fought battle, and it may have some people lose their cool before the end of the day.
Yeah, it is hot in Loudon, New Hampshire. Just because it's the Northeast does not mean it is cool. It is very slick, hot, and we may see some hot tempers as well up there today. Sit back, everybody. Enjoy the race. Thanks for coming along for the ride. We'll see you next weekend on the Racers Odds.
This has been Racers Odds, a presentation of PRN, the Performance Racing Network.